On March 29, 2026, a company ran a travel sale. Deals were live, vendors were active, social media was pumping posts. Everything looked completely normal. 24 hours later, the website was black. Not down for maintenance, not a technical glitch. Black. A single line of text on a dark screen reading, "Click Frenzy Pty Ltd. In liquidation." One of Australia's most recognizable e-commerce brands, 14 years in the making, was gone overnight. No warning to customers, no final farewell post, no goodbye, just a black screen and a government notice filed with ASIC. And today we are going to break down exactly how this happened, the full story, from the chaotic crash that launched everything, to the fatal bet that destroyed it all, to what happens next. Because this story is not just about a shopping website going bust. This is about what happens when ambition outruns reality, when a good idea meets a disastrous decision, and when a war on the other side of the planet kills a business in Melbourne. Let's go from the very beginning. The year is 2012. Australia has a problem. Every year, hundreds of millions of dollars are flying out of the country as Australian shoppers load up their carts on American websites during Cyber Monday and Black Friday, deals that Australian retailers simply were not matching. A man named Grant Arnott sees this and has one thought. What if we built Australia's own version of Cyber Monday? He calls it Click Frenzy, and on November 20, 2012, at exactly 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, he launches it. The hype is enormous. Major Australian retailers sign on. Myer, Bingley, Dell, Target, Microsoft, Priceline, Toys R Us. Television networks cover it. Online newspapers are buzzing. The organizers are publicly boasting they can handle up to 1 million site visits. 7 o'clock hits, Australians click, and the website crashes within moments of launch. Not after an hour, not after 30 minutes, moments. The site stays down for most of the night. Hundreds of thousands of Australians who had been hyped up, ready to spend, are left staring at error screens and loading wheels. The backlash is instant and brutal. The hashtag ClickFail trends nationally on Twitter. Memes spread like wildfire. An event that was supposed to prove Australian e-commerce could compete with the world had just publicly face-planted in front of the entire nation. Grant Arnott goes on Channel 9's Today Show the next morning and publicly admits the failure. It is one of the most embarrassing product launches in Australian business history. But here is the thing, and this is what makes the story so interesting. Click Frenzy does not die. It survives, it rebuilds, and over the next 8 years, it quietly becomes one of the most powerful digital retail platforms in Australia. After the 2012 disaster, the team learns. They fix the infrastructure, they run the events better, they build a loyal audience. By 2020, the year COVID hits and the world goes online, Click Frenzy absolutely explodes. A single sales event in May 2020 pulls in 1.9 million visits. That is a 103% increase compared to the same event the year before. Retailers are flooding in. The platform is generating around $5 million a year in revenue. Power Retail, their sister media business covering Australian e-commerce news, is growing alongside it. Grant Arnott is riding high. The company has private equity backing. Investment firm Tenera Capital takes a 40% stake in 2016. The goal is clear. Grow the business, then list it on the stock exchange in an IPO. Get rich, get out. And in 2021, with revenues tripled, cash in the bank, and the e-commerce market booming off the back of a global pandemic, the IPO dream feels real. So Arnott makes the bet, the big one. The one that, as he himself would later admit, ultimately killed everything.
In 2021, Global Marketplace, the parent company behind Click Frenzy and Power Retail, acquires New Zealand-based e-commerce platform GrabOne for $14.3 million. That is 17.5 million New Zealand dollars. The logic makes sense on paper. To be attractive for an IPO, you need size, you need revenue, you need to show investors a bigger story. GrabOne gives them a foothold in New Zealand. It expands the empire. But here is what happens. That acquisition burns through every dollar of cash the company had, and then, almost immediately, the world changes. The IPO window slams shut. Interest rates begin rising. The cost of living crisis hits Australia hard. Consumer spending tightens. The New Zealand economy, already fragile, enters a rough patch. GrabOne, the asset they had spent $14 million on, begins to struggle badly. Grant Arnott later says this publicly. In his own words, that used up all our cash, and we took on a large amount of debt. Less than a year later, the IPO window had closed, COVID ended, Interest rates and cost of living rose, the New Zealand economy was in poor shape, and the business struggled. It has been a battle ever since. A battle ever since. From 2022 onward, ClickFrenzy is fighting. Every single event, every partnership, every sale is being run under the shadow of the debt from that one acquisition. The company that had cash in the bank and tripled revenues is now scraping to stay afloat. Tanara Capital, sensing the danger, quietly exits the business. By the time the collapse happens in 2026, they have been gone for a long time. And GrabOne, the New Zealand platform they spent $14 million on, it collapses into liquidation in October 2025, reportedly $16.5 million in debt. The asset they bought to grow big enough for an IPO ends up bankrupting itself and contributing to the death of the very company that bought it. So by early 2026, ClickFrenzy is in a deeply fragile state. Revenue around $5 million a year. Power Retail generating just $1.5 million over its last 4 years. Combined annual revenue for both businesses, just $7 million total. That might sound okay until you factor in the debt load from the GrabOne acquisition, the rising operating costs, the shrinking margins of e-commerce in a cost of living crisis where consumers are spending less. The fact that Australian deal platforms, Catch, MyDeal, Little Birdie, are all collapsing around them. The industry ClickFrenzy helped build is imploding. And then, the final blow, the one nobody could have predicted, the US-Iran conflict. In 2026, rising geopolitical tensions between the United States and Iran send shockwaves through the travel industry. Flights get more expensive, consumers get nervous. International travel bookings, which ClickFrenzy had been leaning on heavily as a revenue driver through their travel sale events, dry up completely. The timing could not be worse. ClickFrenzy runs their final travel sale from March 25th through March 29th, 2026. Deals go live, vendors participate, posts go up on social media as if everything is fine. Behind the scenes, the company is already in freefall. On March 30th, 2026, a general meeting of members is held. A resolution is passed. The company will be wound up. That same day, liquidators Frank Lopalato and Adam Cormack from RSM Australia are appointed. Receivers Chris Johnson and Andrew McCabe from Wexted Advisors are also brought in, appointed by a secured creditor who is now enforcing their position. On April 1st, 2026, people who go to the ClickFrenzy website are greeted with a black screen. ClickFrenzy Pty in liquidation. Receivers and managers appointed. That is it. 14 years. Finished. Grant Arnott takes to LinkedIn shortly after. He writes, and I want you to hear these words because they are devastating. Closing the door on those operations feels like the saddest thing I have ever had to do. I am shattered, broken, ashamed, and embarrassed. The hardest part to live with is that it was all so unnecessary. All so unnecessary. The man who built one of Australia's most recognizable online retail brands, who survived the embarrassment of the 2012 crash, who rebuilt from nothing, who tripled his revenue under private equity, is publicly saying the thing that destroyed his company did not have to happen. He's right, and he knows exactly when it went wrong. In his own words, what happened in March this year really started with decisions made back in 2021. The GrabOne acquisition, $14.3 million. All the cash, all the debt. The IPO dream that never came, and then 4 years of fighting a war the company could never quite win, until a conflict in the Middle East finally finished the job. The industry responds with warmth. E-commerce leaders across Australia flood his post with support. You have made a huge impact on the industry, writes Jethro Marks, CEO of the Nile Group. You should be incredibly proud, says entrepreneur Carla Penn-Khan. Dean Salakas calls him a luminary who shaped an entire industry. But the company is gone, and 1.5 million customers now have nowhere to log in.
So what happens now? Is ClickFrenzy actually dead? Maybe not. Here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The receivers at Wexted Advisors, while managing the liquidation, immediately launch a fast-tracked sale campaign. They are not just shutting the doors and selling the furniture. They are actively trying to find a buyer for the ClickFrenzy brand, its 1.5 million member database, and its operational assets. Non-binding indicative offers are called for by April 10, 2026, and someone answers. ClickFrenzy has been acquired by the Leibovich brothers, Gabby and Hezi Leibovich, the founders of Australian e-commerce giant Catch Group. These are not random buyers, these are legends of Australian online retail. They launched Catch of the Day from their garage in 2006. They built it into a national powerhouse over 13 years,
then sold it to Wesfarmers in 2019 for $230 million. They know exactly what they are buying. They know exactly what click frenzy can be. Arnott himself, despite everything, is optimistic about what the Leibovich brothers will do with it. He says, "I am convinced consumers are still looking for exceptional breakout experiences, and I am very keen to see how the new owners address this. They know how from their catch experience, and I think shoppers are in for some excitement." Whether click frenzy rises again under new ownership or quietly fades as a brand folded into another project remains to be seen. But the business is not dead. It's in new hands. So what does this whole story actually teach us? First, timing is everything in business. Click frenzy was profitable. It had tripled revenues. It had a genuine shot at an IPO. And then in 2021, at the exact moment the window was open, they went all in on an acquisition that burned all their cash right before the window slammed shut. 1 year earlier or 1 year later, and the story might have been entirely different. Second, debt is the silent killer. The GrabOne acquisition did not kill click frenzy immediately. It killed it slowly over 4 years. Every event after 2021 was run under the weight of that debt. The Iran conflict and the travel sales collapse were just the final trigger. The gun had been loaded in 2021. Third, the Australian deal platform model is broken. Click frenzy is not alone. Catch collapsed, My Deal collapsed, Little Birdie collapsed. The model of aggregating deals from retailers and driving traffic without controlling the actual transaction generates limited revenue and requires enormous scale to survive. When consumer spending tightens, that model falls apart fast. Fourth, one bad macro event can finish an already fragile business. A war between the United States and Iran has nothing to do with an Australian shopping website, and yet the ripple effects through the travel industry were enough to be the final cash flow blow. In 2026, no business operates in isolation from global events. And fifth, 14 years of brand building does not protect you from bad financial decisions. Click frenzy had 1.5 million members. It had 100,000 Facebook followers. It had survived its own disastrous launch in 2012 and built something genuinely real. None of that mattered when the debt ran out the clock. Here is the final thought. On March 29, 2026, Click Frenzy is running a travel sale. On March 30, 2026, the members vote to wind it up. One day. That is how fast 14 years ends. Grant Arnott described leaving his business as being released from what he called business prison. He said, and this might be the most honest thing any founder has ever said publicly, being out of business prison. I like it. He had been fighting a losing war for 4 years, and somewhere deep down, he probably knew the outcome long before March 2026. The business is now in the hands of the Leibovich brothers. The brand lives on, for now. The 1.5 million members are waiting to see what comes next. And the rest of us are left with a masterclass in what not to do when ambition meets a once-in-a-decade opportunity. Spend all your cash on one acquisition, watch the IPO window close, carry the debt for 4 years, hope a travel sale saves you, and when a war halfway around the world cuts off your last revenue line, one day, that is all it takes. Click Frenzy, 2012 to 2026. Born in a crash, died in silence.